I am just filling in for the next 3 weeks for Wayne. Obviously, he's up at TFE today, and he'll be up there next Sunday too as they wind down. And then he's got some things he wants to do, and so he asked me to actually teach the first Sunday in August. And so I'll be doing 3 weeks worth of lessons here. We're on lesson 26. Um, Page 237 to 240 in your book, Roper's book, deals with the Sermon on the Mount, part 6. How shall I treat others? One of the first, our text is Matthew 5:33 through 48. One of the first things that the outline says for us to consider after listing our text for the lesson, which I just mentioned, is to not forget the context of Matthew 5 and 20. Take a look at 5:20. It says, for Jesus' word says, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." What is Jesus saying here? What do you think he's saying? Yeah. What kind of righteousness did the Pharisees exhibit or have? Yes, their own. It was their religion, their righteousness consisted of external things, ceremonials, rituals, and formalities of many kinds, with little or no attention paid to the condition of the heart. And that's big. That's big. The concept of righteousness held by the Jews, especially the Pharisees, seemed to include only outward conformity to various rituals and requirements without any inward change. So, in contrast, Jesus said that we must not only avoid excesses and abuses, but it must also exceed this kind of surface righteousness that's only on the outside, has to be on the inside. We know that Christ flatly denounced such a concept of only outward righteousness, indicated that no one could be saved in such a state as that of the typical Pharisee of that day. Any thoughts or questions on that little review of 5:20? Okay. So with this concept of inward righteousness, of changing the heart, Jesus compelled his disciples and us today to reach up to the standard of righteousness in 3 specific areas for our lesson today. 1, regarding oaths. 2, regarding mistreatment or retaliation. And 3, regarding our enemies. We got to remember that treating others right involves always telling the truth. Verses 33 through 37 in our text deals with the oaths or vows and integrity, honesty. We're also going to look at Leviticus 19:12, Numbers 32, Deuteronomy 23, 21, 23. I'm going to ask, as you know, sometimes I like to call on people to read for me. And if you would prefer not to, just shake your head no, and it's not a big deal. Jesus' quotation in verse 33. Let's read it. "Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord." Now, what Jesus says here is how the Jewish teachers summarize passages such as those I just mentioned. So, Jack, would you take Leviticus 19:12? Ed, would you take Numbers 30 and 2? And Brian, would you take Deuteronomy 23, 21, and 23? Please. Go ahead, Jack.
You shall not swear falsely by my name, as to profane the name of your God. I am the Lord.
Thank you. Ed?
If a man makes a vow to the Lord, takes an oath to bind himself with a binding obligation, he shall not violate his word. He should do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth.
Thank you. Brian?
You make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and it will be sent to you. If you abstain from vowing, it shall not be sent to you. That which has gone from your lips you shall keep and perform, for you voluntarily vow to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth.
Thank you. See, we read here that the Jews allowed some oaths and forbade others. But Jesus said simply, make no oath at all. Look at verses 34 through 36 in our text. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Also, turn over with me to James 5. James 5 and 12. James writes here, but above all, my brethren, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth, or with any oath, but let your yes be yes, and your no, no, lest you fall into judgment. Let me ask you a question. If a person said to you that he or she did not do something, and then said, I swear to you I didn't do it, does that have any more meaning to you? Probably so. Yeah. I can tell you as a teacher and a substitute teacher and everybody who's been in the classroom, Mr. Gentry, I swore I didn't do it. I didn't take his phone. I didn't get into, take his project. They think that that means something, that it means more. Today, many say, I swear, so as to add validity to what they are saying. If a person's word can be trusted, then there is no need for an oath, right? I tell kids this all the time. Always tell the truth. Always tell the truth. And the thing about the truth is the truth never changes, does it? It doesn't. You might get another interpretation of it, but the basic truth never changes. And that's important. You don't have to remember what you said. I mentioned this before. I know most criminals get caught up and found guilty because when they're asked to repeat the story, they leave out or add to, and it's not the same story. A little fishy there. Swearing by anything Jesus mentioned in the verses 34 through 36, he's talking about do not swear at all, neither by heaven, again, for it's God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is a city of the great King. It would not add any weight to our words. Would not add any weight to our words. Let me ask you this. How about having another person swear to our credibility? I swear Jack has never lied in his life. He's the greatest man that ever walked next to Jesus. I mean, how about that? Would that make a difference? It shouldn't. It shouldn't. What does help, though? What does help? And we've kind of been walking all around it, is always being truthful. That's right. That's right. Let your yes be yes and your no, no. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But what does help is being truthful and being known as a person who is trustworthy. Look over what Paul wrote in Ephesians 4 and 25, please. Four and 25, Paul writes to the church in Ephesus and says this, therefore, putting away lying, each one speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. We are members of one another. Jesus said that rather than try to give credence to our words by swearing on something, remember the Jews felt an oath was not binding unless they swore by something divine at the time of the oath. We should just let our words mean what we say. Again, when we say yes, like Jack said, we ought to mean it. And just the opposite, too. When we say no, we ought to mean it. Sometimes I think parents could follow that rule a little bit better. Any questions or comments? Okay. It is sad to say in our world today that we have gone from my word is my bond to I cannot accept your word without a bond. And even then, people will lie. Look at how many people lie under oath. All the time. I guess they think the odds of getting caught is small. Perjury is serious. Happens a lot. When people do not trust one another, lasting friendships are difficult to build. Even in the home and even in the church. I think we could all agree to that. Roper in his book summed it up very well when he wrote, Christ's disciples should be so consistent in telling the truth that it is unnecessary to resort to oaths to convince others to accept their word. And that is so true. Now, remember, note this, that this did not forbid civil oaths. Okay? When being tried by the Sanhedrin, Jesus answered under oath. In fact, turn to Matthew 26. And we'll be in verse 63, starting with. It says this, but Jesus kept silent, and the high priest answered and said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. NIV says this, I actually like it better. I charge you under oath by the living God. Jesus said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power, coming on the clouds of heaven. You know, when I think about that, wouldn't that kind of be do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you yourself? Yeah, I don't know how that went back then, but that made me kind of smile a little bit. Just as a side note to verse 34, many courts today allow the conscientious adherent, if you would, to our Savior's words. In the place of saying that, they have the privilege of affirming under the penalties of perjury instead of taking the customary oath. And I think that's pretty good, pretty cool. Any thoughts, comments? Moving on. All right, let's talk about retaliation, my favorite subject. Verses 38 through 42 concerns mistreatment or retaliation. Look at verse 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The quotation that is used here by Jesus in this verse is directly from the Old Testament. Okay? I'm going to call upon some more people. James, would you mind reading Exodus 21, 23 through 25? Jan, would you mind reading Leviticus 24:20? And Geraldine, could you please read Deuteronomy 19:21? Okay, when you get that, James, go ahead.
Burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Just as he was injured, a man, so we shall be inflicted on him.
Thank you. And Geraldine, Deuteronomy. Thank you, thank you.
Question: does this seem like harsh punishment? I see nobody wants to commit. I see a few heads nod. Well, yeah. While this may at first seem like a savage and cruel punishment, it was actually a law of mercy. Okay? First, it prevented a person from dealing out more punishment than was due. Second, it prevented roaming bands of vigilantes from administering any kind of justice, so to speak, they deemed proper. This concept, or the law of retaliation, can be traced back when it was first recorded in the Code of Hammurabi. I may not be saying that right, but a Babylon king who lived long before Moses. Been a long time. You know, before then, the law of the jungle was different. You kill my child, I will kill all your children, your wife, your brothers, your whole generation. I mean, they went way, way, way beyond. If you knock out my tooth, I will knock out all of yours. Then I'll kill you. I mean, that's how bad it was. So this law of retaliation was really a vast improvement that limited punitive action to the extent of the original injury. If you poked out somebody's eye, you were sentenced to have your eye poked out. 1 for 1. Now, the scribes and the Pharisees had taken something God meant for man's good and, of course, made it something evil. Instead of using this law of retaliation to protect people, they perverted it to justify retaliation against their enemies. You know, Jesus not only dealt with this perversion of the law, but he also showed the spiritual aspect of God's original intent. The original intent was good. And above all else, when all else fails, most of all, we need to remember that God said, vengeance is what? Is mine. He says, I will repay. Romans 12:19, also in Hebrews 10:30. See, by the time of Christ, the law was seldom applied literally. People did not go around knocking out others' teeth or putting out their eyes. A system of negotiated payment had been worked out whereby a judge determined the worth of an individual eye or a tooth if such thing happened. So, for example, an eye might be worth or valued at a year's wages or more, maybe. A tooth might be valued at a few bushels of wheat. This is, when you think about it, this is very similar to the way personal injuries are handled today in our courts. How damage are assessed and awarded is based upon the injury that you received. And that's how the courts handle it today. Now, problem with that is people abuse the system. Oh, yeah, and do exactly what Jesus said not to do. Instead of receiving just compensation for injury, people seek vengeance or demand retribution that is unreasonable. Problem is, people want to get even and they want to get rich. And that's why you see these exuberant lawsuits and stuff like that. Any thoughts or questions? I mean, we just went through a lawsuit on TV with, who was the guy that played Captain Hook? Yes, thank you. And his significant other, I guess. Okay, Jesus' command, do not resist an evil person, in 39a, the first part of it here, says, but I tell you not to resist an evil person. Sounds like he's saying, do not seek justice. Is that what he's saying? Let me read it again. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. What is he saying here? Ed. Okay. Right, and I certainly 100% agree on that. One of the things, the statement has to be viewed in the context of uh, Jesus' original remarks. The Greek word for resist is antihistemi, which we get the word antihistamine from. Now we know the body produces histamines. They cause scratching, but they all have they have other functions that they do in the body. And sometimes when they get out of whack, it can affect, and we commonly take antihistamines because what is bothering us? Allergies. Yeah, our allergies have just woo, and we have to do that. In this text, resist refers to harm done to us by someone evil. Jesus was giving instructions on how to handle matters of personal injury and how to resist vengeance, spite, and resentment. Yes? Yes. Right. That's right. And we're going to talk about that, which is a topic that is hard for a lot of people to accept, to turn the other cheek, so to speak. But no, it's about forgiveness. It's about not, the Bible tells us it's okay to be angry, but don't let the sun go down on our anger or our vengeance. And so, yeah, it's definitely about forgiveness. I agree. Other comments? Good. It does. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. Now, the thing we need to remember here, he certainly did not mean that we should not speak out against uh, injustice. Something which Jesus did on numerous occasions, Matthew 21 and 12, John 2 and 5. See, what question? Total non-resistance to evil would do what? Wouldn't it encourage it more? I'll give you the perfect example. Think about the no cash bail in New York State. People get, just Lee Zeldin, that congressman, got attacked on stage. And he said, moments later, he said, that guy will be out in the street within less than a couple hours. And he was. Now, I heard yesterday afternoon that he got picked up on federal charges. So maybe we'll see. But it would encourage wrongdoing if you did nothing. That's not what Jesus meant. James 4 and 7 tells us to resist the devil. And we are to resist any evil which he initiates. And there's so many scriptures on that. John F. MacArthur Jr., a non-denominational preacher, wrote this in his commentary. He says, not to restrain evil is neither just nor kind. It fails to protect the innocent and has the effect of encouraging the wicked in their evil. Proper restraint of evil, however, not only is just, but is beneficent as well. To lower God's standards of justice is to lower God's standards of righteousness, which Jesus came to fulfill and clarify, not to diminish. I think that's worded greatly. After setting forth these basic principles against personal retaliation, Jesus described 5 incidents to illustrate how we should deal with mistreatment. Any thoughts or questions before we move on? Yes, Ed. Yeah. Yeah. tell you. A couple, Brian. Oh yeah. Probably not. Yeah. I yeah. Yeah. Ed. Yeah. Sometimes we get into what I call a word fight. You know what I mean? And I mean, I don't know. If someone came up and knocked you out or knocked you down, I'm not sure how to react to that. I think you need to protect yourself. Anyway, we can discuss that later. Any other thoughts? Good comments? Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What is that saying? Bad things will happen when good men do nothing, or something like that. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. Above and beyond. Yeah. Agree. Good. Any other comments? Okay. Gotta find my place here. The first involved. Let me back up. I'm sorry. Oh, to deal with mistreatment. Okay, we're going to talk about the 5 things. First one involved an act of physical assault. Jesus was not referring to hitting someone in the face with a fist. Okay, he was talking about striking someone's face with the back of the hand or the palm of the hand. Okay, now the Jews considered that the worst possible insult. We see Jesus being struck this way in Matthew 26, 67, 68, Mark 14, 65, John 18, 22. Certainly, certainly more harm than this could be done to the body, but a slap on the face was demeaning and dishonoring. It's interesting that Jewish law gave twice as much compensation to a man who was struck across the face with the back of someone's hand as to one who hit him in the face with his fist. That to me is pretty amazing. disrespect. Yes, it is. Rather than retaliating against the insult of a smack on the face, Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. Now, kind of like what we were talking, what would be the natural reaction? Boom! That would be the natural reaction by a lot of people to deck him. But turning the other cheek shows what? Control, very much control. You're right there. Doesn't it demonstrate an unvengeful, an unretaliatory attitude? It really shows, in my opinion, dignity and strength of character. Understand? Yeah. I mean, there's so many things here. Paul wrote in Romans 12:20 that when we respond to mistreatment with kindness, we heap burning coals on the offender's head. What does Paul mean here? What does he mean when he says burning coals upon the offender's head? What he means is when we respond to ill treatment in this way with kindness, the offender should burn with shame. Think about that. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done something and somebody pointed out. I don't know exact circumstances, but you really felt bad. I mean, you were ashamed of yourself that you did it. Yeah. Any questions or comments on that? Yes, Ed. Probably. I mean, Will Smith can testify to that. With Chris Rock, was it? Man, that was not cool. But I think a slap in the face can maybe occur if somebody has thought you have offended them. You know, um, I think when I was in 7th grade, I said something to April Hall. I don't remember. This is the truth. I don't remember what I said, but she hauled off and slapped me across the face. And I looked at her, and again, I can't remember what I said, but I was put in my place. I'll tell you that much. I did not slap her back. No, Mama taught me a little better. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, I've tried to research my brain housing group of what I said, but I cannot remember. But I remember the slap. Yeah, yeah. To not talk, you mean, or to yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, I remember the Board of Education. Anyway, good. Yeah, there's things funny that what you do remember and stuff about things like that. Um, yes, yeah. Oh, I think it's more prevalent today than ever was before. That's my personal opinion. I mean, we're having things forced down our throat, and that just lights my fire. I got to be honest with you. It just bothers me that we're being forced all this, and you can name it. I mean, runs the whole gamut. Yes. Mhm. Yeah, it's an eye opener for sure. Yeah, I think back. Our founding fathers must be rolling over in their graves. I mean, so far removed from what their original intent for us and things. I don't know, folks. I think the next few years is going to be interesting. Put it that way. Yes, Geraldine. No. Uh-uh. Keep talking. Sure. You never know the outcome. Yeah. I remember a little bit about the story. I didn't focus a lot on that, but that's a great illustration. Absolutely great. Yeah. Any other comments? Okay. The second illustration Jesus uses in verse 40 says, if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. The second illustration pictures a person being sued in court, if you will. If a defendant did not have adequate financial resources, a debt could be paid in clothing. Interesting. However, the cloak, which was worn like a coat, was generally not taken as payment. See, in addition to being a covering from the weather, a cloak was used as a blanket sometimes in the winter, or maybe rolled up as a pillow in the summer. So it meant a lot. It's interesting, even when a person surrendered his cloak voluntarily as security on a debt or a loan, it was to be returned to him at night. Examples of that in Exodus 22, Deuteronomy 24, and Job 22. Now, while the courts would not require a man to give up his cloak, he could voluntarily do it. That's what Jesus is saying here. What he was saying here, that it would be better to give up one's cloak in a lawsuit than to be bitter and resentful. Bitter and resentful. It might be hard to do sometimes, to give up clothing to keep warm. Any of you watch that TV show Alone? I guess my wife and I are the only weird ones in here. Anyway, it's about people who go taken up to different parts in Alaska and whatnot, and they're just dropped off, and they have certain things they can bring with them, and they are to survive. It's a survival thing. But some of them, many times, they have these heavy, heavy coats, and I think they wouldn't make it if they didn't have those heavy coats during the wintertime up there. Anyway, okay, the third illustration, and this will probably be our last one for time. The third illustration used by Jesus in verse 41 says, and whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. See, it concerned the Roman officials' practice of commandeering or compelling or forcing, if you will, Jews to carry their burdens for them. It was a system that allowed the Roman soldiers to compel Simon of Cyrene to bear the cross of Christ in Matthew 27 and 32. A soldier could only require a citizen to carry his luggage for 1 mile. Now, the Jews were pretty smart. They developed the practice of driving stakes 1 mile from their property line in case they were forced to carry a Roman official's baggage. When they reached that marker, they would refuse to go any further because that was all that they had to do. Jesus was asking his disciples not to resist such a request, but be willing to go the second mile. Go that extra. Now, let me ask you this as we close. What might that accomplish? Yeah. Ed? That's exactly right. Other comments, maybe? It would certainly maybe have a godly influence on that soldier, like softening him up. Jesus asked his followers to go above and beyond the call of duty, if you will. Later he said, when you do all the things which you are commanded, you say, we are unworthy slaves. We have done only that which we have ought to have done. Luke 17:10. If we just get by on doing the things that we are commanded to do, are we going beyond? No, I don't think so. Here Jesus is saying, go that extra mile. Go that extra mile. Any closing comments? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could be here in body, but we need to be here in spirit, in mind, soul, all that. Well, thank you so much. It's good to be back home again, and we'll finish this lesson up and answer the questions on Wednesday night. Thank you.